The real definition of black fatigue has got nothing to do with people being tired of being around black people. So, black fatigue is the toll of racism on the mind, body, and spirit. Hello, thank you for joining me today. We live in a world where conversations about race, injustice, and equity are finally happening out loud. But there's a term you may have heard of, one that deserves deeper understanding. The term is black fatigue. Black fatigue isn't about being tired from work or worn out from life in general. It is a generational exhaustion, emotional, psychological, physical, that comes with the unrelenting experience of racism. It is the cumulative weight of navigating a world where systemic inequities and daily aggressions never seem to pause. Today we're going to explore the term black fatigue, where it comes from, how it shows up, and what we must do about it. The term black fatigue was popularized by Mary Frances Winters in her groundbreaking book, Black Fatigue: How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit. She defines it as the exhaustion black people feel from dealing with racism and inequality day in and day out, year after year, generation after generation. Black fatigue is not a single moment of stress. It is a chronic stress that builds up over time. Being the only black person in the room and having to constantly represent the entire race. Being followed in the store or pulled over in your own neighborhood. Working twice as hard for half the recognition and half the compensation as well. Watching your community suffer from economic disparities, poor health care, and underfunded schools. Enduring the trauma of videos showing police violence and hearing the same debates replayed with little justice. It is fatigue, not just of the body, but of the spirit. It has historical roots. To understand black fatigue, we have to recognize that it is not new. It is woven into the history of systemic racism in the United States and around the world. Slavery, Jim Crow laws, redlining, mass incarceration, apartheid. These weren't just moments of injustice. They were cycles of trauma, inequality, and exclusion that continue to today. Even after legal segregation ended, structural inequalities persisted. Black people were and still are locked out of generational wealth disproportionately, targeted by law enforcement and underrepresented in leadership. This story isn't just academic, it's felt. It shows up in health disparities, with someone like Serena Williams almost dying because her doctors didn't believe that she had a headache, which turned out to be a blood clot. Economic inequality and the stress black people carry from navigating a world not built for them. So, how does it show up today? Let's talk about how black fatigue manifests today. In the workplace, black professionals often report having to code switch, downplay their culture, and act as the diversity spokesperson for their entire race. Many experience microaggressions, those subtle slights that are constant reminders of being seen as other. In healthcare, studies show that Black Americans have higher rates of hypertension, diabetes, and maternal mortality. Chronic stress caused by racism is a major contributor. This isn't about biology, it's about lived experiences. In education, Black students are more likely to be punished more harshly than their white peers for the same behaviors, and specifically Black men, which has the trajectory of more black men not going to university because of how they've been treated in the run up to university. They're often underrepresented in advanced classes and overrepresented in disciplinary actions. In daily life, every time a video surfaces of an unarmed black person being killed by law enforcement or white people, black communities relive the trauma of lynching. The emotional weight is constant. The fight for justice never seems to end. Imagine running a race where the finish line keeps moving. That's what black fatigue feels like. There are emotional and psychological impacts, so let's go deeper into the emotional toll. Black fatigue often leads to racial battle fatigue, a term used by William Smith to describe the stress response from constant racial discrimination. It includes symptoms like anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, insomnia, emotional numbness. Black people are often expected to be resilient, but resilience shouldn't mean carrying a constant burden with a smile. There's a price to pay for the so-called strength. It's not just burnout, it's soul weariness, the double burden. And here's what makes it worse. Many black people face a double burden. Not only are they dealing with the effects of racism, but they're also expected to educate others about it. In the wake of a traumatic event, they're asked to speak on panels, lead diversity efforts, and explain how they feel, often to people who have never experienced what they're describing. Imagine grieving and being asked to perform. That's the reality for many. So why is it so prominent now? Why are we hearing about black fatigue now? The last few years have been the tipping point. The murder of George Floyd in 2020 was a catalyst for global protests. The pandemic, a stark reminder of racial disparities in healthcare and economic stability. The weight of these moments broke through the public consciousness. Black people have been shouting for generations. Now, more people are starting to listen. But listening isn't the only step. Change is the goal. So what can be done? Acknowledge it. Don't dismiss it. Believe people when they say they are tired, anxious, angry, or numb. Don't ask them to explain or justify their feelings. Reduce the burden. If you are in a position of privilege, take on some of the emotional labor. Don't rely on your black colleagues or friends to do all the work. Push for systemic change. It's not enough to not be racist. We need to be anti-racist, and that means challenging systems that perpetuate inequality at work, in schools, healthcare, and in policy. Prioritize black well-being. Support the mental health of your black colleagues. Offer a space of healing and create environments where people don't have to constantly defend their existence. Black fatigue is real. It is not an overreaction or hypersensitivity. It is not a political talking point. It's the result of centuries of oppression, injustice, and trauma felt in the bones and the soul of black people. But it doesn't have to stay that way. By acknowledging the pain, confronting the systems that cause it, and building spaces of healing and equity, we can begin to lift that weight. Not with pity, not with guilt, but with shared humanity and collective responsibility. What does that look like? It looks like people stop denying that there are racial inequalities and inequities in society and actually doing something about it, creating opportunities for black people and people of color. Hello everyone, Makadini, and welcome to my channel. Thank you for giving me your precious time and attention. Before I forget, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel.